You know what? I think it's long past due for me to talk about the Dresden clone. Hey everyone, welcome back to Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and today guys, we've got a recommendation video here for you. But before we get into that, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, as it does help us grow. While you're doing that, you might as well check the description box down below for links to all my social media, including information about my Patreon. And with that out of the way, it is now time to talk about the Dresden clone, or specifically like detective fantasy. This isn't necessarily going to be urban fantasy, but there is going to be a lot of urban fantasy on this list. And of course, to kick it off, I mean, I know I said Dresden clone, but we're gonna have to talk about Dresden as well, because it's kind of, I don't know if it's the OG, but it's definitely like one of the OGs. It came out in 2000, so I mean, it's been out for a couple decades now. We've got 18 books, 2 short story collections, a novella, and some graphic novels. Now, I haven't read the graphic novels or the current novella, The Law. I haven't read these ones yet, but I am up through Battleground. I have read the short story collections, and they are something I greatly enjoy. Dresden, of course, is just kind of this down on his luck young mage when we first meet him all the way back in, I believe, Stormfront is book 1. And when we meet Dresden, you know, he's got the doom of Damocles hanging over his head. He has done something that the White Council doesn't quite appreciate. And yeah, they're watching him. They think that he has the potential to become a dark mage. And so they kind of just treat him very, very poorly. And kind of, it starts out of kind of this, you know, he's this mad magician in the phone book for hire. He goes out and does these jobs. He'll deal with vampires. He'll deal with zombies. Just everything. Like he kind of, as he grows, builds this found family, becomes more powerful, kind of comes into his own, and we really see the series shift from detective more to just brawler. Like, I mean, he comes in and he is going to punch the problems in the face. And it's kind of what, now that I'm talking about it, if anybody has watched Doctor Who, like, classic Doctor didn't go out to save galaxies and universes and stuff like that. Like, he was just kind of exploring history, and then as the years went on, he kind of became this powerhouse in the universe. Like, he built a name for himself, and that's kind of what Dresden does as well. It kind of follows that linear kind of progression up, where it's just like, well, I'm just kind of nobody. I'm kind of just trying to make do. I can barely pay my rent, to where he's doing pretty okay. He's got some friends. He's a known name. Like, people, like, he's hard to ignore. So that's Dresden, and everything that has spawned off of Dresden since. My next answer would, of course, or recommendation, would be Alex Verus by Benedict Jaka. And guys, this one is so good. It's about 12 books, and I think there's a follow-up novella. And I don't know if that's kicking off something else, but as of right now, the initial arc of Verus is done. And this is kind of similar in the theme of Dresden, and in fact, like, I believe Butcher has a blurb on the cover that says Dresden would like Alex Verus. And, you know, Alex Verus kind of falls into the gray area. He's not a white mage, but he's not a dark mage either. And he just kind of wants to be left alone. He owns this little magic curio shop, and, you know, they've got this kind of class system in this world where the adepts can't really do magic, but then the mages kind of, like, you know, abuse power, and the dark mages, while being evil, like, don't go out of their way to be evil, but at the same time, they're evil, and they'll do evil stuff. They're more power for power's sake type of deal. And Alex kind of got away from his master, and when doing that, he, like, went to the white mages, but because he had been a dark apprentice, they wanted nothing to do with him, and so he kind of separated himself from society. The difference between Alex and Dresden is Dresden had a lot of power. He had a lot of raw power. Alex is just a seer who has the ability to kind of see pathways and predict future events and stuff like that, and the closer the event is, the more he can predict it, and that allows him a lot of versatility, but not a lot of power. And so throughout the entirety of the series, like, people keep telling Alex, hey, you are kind of, like, you know, using your connections in order to get through these issues. You need to get more powerful. And we kind of see, like, what happens when, you know, it reaches ahead, and what Alex has to do to, in order to survive. So it's a very interesting take on that. I really enjoyed this series. I gave it 5 stars. Up next, we've got 2 series by the same author, and that's going to happen a couple times in this video. We've got Kate Daniels by Alona Andrews, which is a husband and wife duo. They write a post-apocalyptic urban fantasy romance. And then they also do Hidden Legacy, which is a urban fantasy kind of detective mercenary thing with, again, romance. And there's always going to be that romance element in an Alona Andrews style series. It's just going to be there. That's kind of what they do. Like, the covers look very romance. Don't let the covers scare you away. It's just that romance sells better than urban fantasy. And so it's easier to market to romance readers than it is to, say, muscle in on that fantasy market. And so that's why the covers look very, very romance. But Kate Daniels is kind of this mercenary who has got this kind of dark hidden past. She's kind of in hiding. She kind of joins up to become this mercenary when her mentor and tutor kind of turns up dead. This takes place in Atlanta, Georgia, in a world where magic and technology are warring with each other. So when magic is in, technology doesn't work, and when technology is in, magic doesn't work. And so it creates these very interesting kind of dynamics within this world. I absolutely love it. And this is a 10-book series. There's a spin-off as well, and a sequel series. No, there's 2 spin-offs, a bunch of novellas, and a sequel as well. So there is a lot to dig your teeth into if you are looking for quite a bit of content to read. Then Hidden Legacy, I believe, is 6 books and a novella, as it currently stands. This is, again, another world. While we have a lot of shifters and shapeshifters and stuff in Kate Daniels, Hidden Legacy deals with more magic. Like, there are magical beings. You can kind of judge the strength of somebody's magic, and like how powerful you are kind of judges where you fall in society. And kind of the Hidden Legacy family, and I forget the characters' names, it's been a while. But basically, they're kind of this family who's fallen on hard times. They've opened up this agency, they run a garage and stuff like that, and they kind of come in and help and fix certain issues. They are kind of hiding certain things. There's a good, strong fantasy romance going along there as well, when, like, it's going to use that trope of, like, the powerful mage who happens to be, like, muscular and have lots of money, like, is going to kind of come in, and that happens in both series. But at the same time, I still think it's done incredibly well. So, yeah, that is one you should check out as well. I don't remember a whole lot of details, mainly because I've been away from this series for, like, 3 to 4 years. Next up, we've got October Day by Shannon McGuire. I never know if I'm saying Shannon McGuire's name correctly. Feel free to correct me if I'm saying that incorrect, or saying that wrong. Saying that incorrect. Anyway, whatever. I don't know how to speak. But October Day is kind of a fae detective story, where I don't remember the city that this is set in. It could be Chicago? I don't think it's Chicago. It might be Chicago. Oh, no, it's San Francisco. I believe this is in San Francisco. I think it's in California. But here we've got more fae. We've got Neskies, or Selkies, not Neskies, Selkies. I don't know where Neskies are. But Selkies, we've got just shapeshifters and things of that nature. Basically, we've got a world where the fae are interacting in like the mortal realm, but they use like glamours and stuff to like keep themselves hidden. They can kind of like, they have these pockets of like land where like people will just naturally avoid it, and if they do wander in, then they can't see, like, depending on how magical you are, depends on how much magic you can see. And October is kind of like this 50-50 mix. Her mother is a firstborn, which means she comes from very high up in the fae hierarchy, but because she is only half mortal, she can only see a certain amount of magic. And basically, she tries to leave that life behind. She wants to live a mortal life. She wants to, like, fall in love, get married, have kids. And then something happens where she goes missing for 5 years. And when she comes back, things are different. Her life has kind of moved on. She's kind of seen as this kind of deadbeat mother who disappeared because she can't explain where she's been because it's magical in nature. And so she's got to kind of start back from square one. There are some fantastic court politics that are going on here, and there's a lot of detective work. She keeps constantly getting pulled in to solve stuff that's above her weight class, and she's just got to somehow figure it out. Very good stuff. I think I'm about 10 or 11 books into there. into this series. I think there's like 15 or 16 of them now. It's just a series that like I've got enough space between that I kind of need to go back and start over from the beginning if I'm going to get caught up. Next up, we have got Fetch Phillips, which is Last Smile in Sunder City by Luke Arnold. And this one is kind of interesting because it's high fantasy, as in high fantasy does not take place on Earth. It takes place in a fantasy world. And Fetch Phillips is a human, but basically the way that this world works is humanity kind of got jealous of the kind of magical creatures. And so in order to do this, they went and found the fount of magic, and they meddled with it. And when that happened, magic disappeared from the world. So a large portion of the magic just shriveled up, like dragons fell out of the sky. Vampires just burnt or aged or started aging. Elves lost their immortality. Trolls just turned into rocks. And so kind of magical beings are still around, but they are now mortal. They can't really do magic. And yet some fantastical things are starting to happen. And so people are basically asking Fetch, who is a complete and utter wreck. Like, we get a lot of his backstory in this story or in this book, and he's a hot mess. Like, he's constantly like taking painkillers or drinking, or like he's very down on his luck. He's constantly getting beat up because he's just a human, getting beat up by a lot of stronger beings. Like, don't get me wrong, just because they lost their magic doesn't mean they lose everything. But, like, you know, vampires can't drink blood anymore and stuff like that. So, like, somebody's gone missing and they come to him and they try to hire him. And they're like, hey, what's going on here? And then he's like, hey, you need to stop looking into this. And just events unfold and he bumbles around until he can kind of find out what's going on. It's very, very good. I gave the first book like 4.5 stars. Read it last month. I'm very excited to continue. Now, I think one of the closest to the Dresden clones that we're going to come to is Menic Thorn. This is by Patrick Samphire, and I've only read Shadow of a Dead God. I think there's 3 books out currently. This is self-pub, and this was an utter delight. This is another high fantasy, so it's not taking place on Earth, but it is in an urban environment. This is in a city that has slums, kind of an industrial revolution style of setting from what I'm kind of pulling from it. But basically what Menic is the mages in this society are kind of, you know, the lords. They rule everything. Like, if you're a mage, you can kind of do whatever you want. But Menic doesn't really agree with that. Like, he doesn't like the way that the mages conduct or purport themselves. So he's decided to become a mage for hire, a lot like Dresden. The differences comes in where, kind of like Alex Varys, he doesn't have a lot of power to draw from. He's got, like, fine-tune work. While Dresden has a lot of power to pull from, but he can't do fine-tune work. And again, because he doesn't have a lot of power, Menic gets the crap beat out of him so much. Patrick put Menic through his paces. Like, you see him go through a lot of stuff. Basically, there is a killing going on. His childhood friend, Benny, is a thief, and he kind of calls in some favors to have them go do a job. The job goes sideways, and while the job is going sideways, a death occurs in the same location, and it gets pinned on him and Benny, and he's got to try and find a way to prove his innocence. It's very, very good, very compelling, interesting kind of soft magic. I really enjoyed this one. Up next, we have got 3 by the same author. Well, one is a co-author, but he's still on it, and it's all set within the same world. These are also self-pub, and these are going to be the Nate Temple verse. There are 3 set in this world, and I believe we've got Phantom Queen, Feathers and Fire, and we have got Nate Temple. And all of these are set in the Temple verse. These are basically like Dresden, if Dresden was born with a boatload of money instead of just an orphan. And it kind of takes place where kind of Nate is almost Iron Man, where he can kind of just do whatever he wants. He's a billionaire. He's got all the money. He's got all the magic. And then we also get the entire pantheon. Feathers and Fire follows Kelly Penrose, who is, I think, a fallen angel or partially fallen angel. And then we follow Quinn McKenna in Phantom Queen, who is, I believe, a descendant of the Tuatha Diana. I've said that incorrectly. It's Irish. Yes, these are fantastic beings. I believe over the entire universe there are plus 20 books at this point. So there is quite a bit to delve into. The last one I want to talk about is the one I haven't read yet, and that is Duckett and Dyer, Dicks for Hire by G.M. Nair. And this one sounds kind of, it's going to be urban fantasy, but it's going to be kind of a lower urban fantasy using magic and parallel universes. So it's going to be kind of like a fantasy sci-fi, but basically these are just two kind of people who are down on their luck, and all of a sudden fantastical things start kind of happening to them, and all of a sudden like ads start appearing for their detective agency, despite the fact that they didn't start a detective agency. So they just decide to go for it. This is one I'm excited to read, so I'm going to go ahead and say go ahead and give it a shot, because I hear it's funny, I hear it's really good, and the covers look fantastic. That said, guys, that should be 10 or 11 of the detective fantasy kind of subtrope, or the Dresden clone as you want it to be, or just, you could say, urban fantasy. That's all I've really got for you today, so till next time, peace out, stay magical, bye. And as always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons.